The words cut through the sterile hospital air like a blade. "Enough with this superstitious nonsense, Mama. Your wooden doll isn't going to save you." Dr. Michael Santos stood at the foot of his mother's hospital bed, his professor's voice carrying the same authority that had dismantled countless student arguments in his philosophy lectures. But this wasn't a classroom debate about the existence of God. This was Elena Santos, 78 years old, clutching her rosary beads as cancer consumed her frail body, and her son had just shattered 40 years of respectful silence about her faith. The small wooden statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe sat on Elena's bedside table, its painted eyes seeming to watch as Michael's sister Rosa gasped in horror. "Miguel, how can you say such things? She's dying, and you want to take away the only thing that gives her peace." Before we go deeper into this mystery, take a moment to subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries. Stories like this are too powerful to experience alone. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Share a simple prayer for families facing impossible choices. Michael's jaw tightened as he watched his mother's weathered fingers trace each bead with trembling devotion. 3 decades of academic success, published papers debunking religious philosophy, and prestigious university positions, all of it felt meaningless, watching his brilliant, educated mother waste her final days whispering to a piece of painted wood. "She's a retired mathematics professor, Rosa. She taught calculus for 40 years. This blind faith is beneath her intelligence." Elena's voice emerged as barely a whisper, her eyes never leaving the small statue. "Miguel, my son, I know you think I'm a foolish old woman, but she has been with me through every joy, every sorrow, through your father's death, through your children's births, through every moment you needed protection and never knew it." The heart monitor's steady beeping seemed to punctuate the sudden silence that fell over the room. Michael's brother Carlos shifted uncomfortably in the corner chair, while Rosa's tears fell silently onto her own rosary. Outside, the November wind rattled the hospital windows, and somewhere down the hallway, another family faced their own crisis of faith and medicine. "I'm sorry, Mama," Michael said finally, his voice softer but still edged with frustration. "I just can't watch you suffer while believing in fairy tales." He kissed her forehead gently, gathered his coat, and left his family to their vigil. But what happened in room 314 that night, according to the nurses who witnessed it, would challenge everything Dr. Michael Santos thought he knew about the boundaries between the possible and the impossible. The wooden statue had been Elena's constant companion for over 50 years, a wedding gift from Michael's grandmother that traveled from their small apartment in East LA to the suburban home where she raised 3 children, and now to this sterile hospital room where everything smelled of disinfectant and approaching goodbye. Michael remembered the statue from his earliest childhood, how his mother would kneel before it each morning, whispering prayers in Spanish while the coffee percolated and dawn light filtered through their kitchen window. As a boy, he'd found comfort in the ritual, the way Elena's face would soften when she spoke to the painted figure, as if Our Lady of Guadalupe were a dear friend, listening patiently to the concerns of a young mother struggling to feed her family on a teacher's salary. She never missed a morning, Rosa had reminded him earlier that day, her voice thick with grief. Even when Papa was dying, even when you were going through your divorce, even when Carlos was drinking, she'd wake up at 5:30 and pray for all of us. But somewhere between his master's degree in philosophy and his doctoral dissertation on the mythology of religious experience, Michael had stopped seeing devotion and started seeing delusion. He'd watched brilliant colleagues waste precious intellectual energy on what he viewed as medieval superstition. His own mother, who could solve complex mathematical equations and taught advanced calculus to college students, had become a source of private embarrassment when she'd mention her conversations with the Virgin Mary at faculty gatherings. The cancer diagnosis 3 months ago had only intensified his frustration. While Eleanor spent her remaining energy organizing prayer novenas and asking friends to visit Marian shrines on her behalf, Michael researched experimental treatments, consulted oncology specialists across the country, and fought insurance companies for cutting-edge therapies. Science versus superstition, he thought bitterly. Progress versus surrender. "You don't understand, Miguel," Elena had told him just last week, her thin hands cradling the wooden figure as afternoon light streamed through the hospital window. "She doesn't promise to change what must happen. She promises to be with us through what must happen. There's a difference." But Michael saw only wasted time. Every hour Elena spent in prayer was an hour not spent fighting, not spent living, not spent being present with the grandchildren who needed their abuela, more than some distant, silent deity needed their grandmother's desperate whispers. The irony wasn't lost on him that Elena had taught mathematics, the purest form of logical reasoning, while simultaneously believing that a 15th century apparition to an indigenous man could somehow influence 21st century medical outcomes. How could someone who understood the elegant certainty of numbers embrace the chaos of faith? As he'd driven home from the hospital that night, Michael's phone buzzed with text updates from Rosa. "Mama's stable for now. The night nurse says she's been quiet, just holding her rosary. The little statue is right there beside her." What Michael couldn't have known was that during those quiet midnight hours, when Elena's breathing grew shallow and the monitors recorded changes that would puzzle doctors for weeks to come, something was beginning that would shatter every assumption he'd built about the boundaries between the rational and the inexplicable. Dr. Patricia Hernandez had worked the night shift at St. Mary's Medical Center for 15 years, and she'd never seen anything quite like what happened in room 314 between midnight and dawn. Mrs. Santos was failing, she would later tell her supervisor, reviewing the chart with confusion evident in her voice. Her oxygen saturation was dropping, her blood pressure was barely registering, and her family had been called to prepare for the worst. I checked on her at 11:47 p.m., and honestly, I didn't expect her to see morning. But when Dr. Hernandez returned at 2:15 a.m. for what she assumed would be a final assessment, Elena Santos was sitting upright in bed, her color remarkably improved, asking for water and inquiring about her grandchildren. The monitors showed readings that made no medical sense given her condition just hours earlier. "I've never questioned my faith," Dr. Hernandez confided to her colleague, "but what I witnessed that night, it wasn't gradual improvement. It was like someone had reset her entire system between my rounds." Michael received Rosa's frantic call at 3:30 a.m. "Miguel, you need to get here. Something's happened with Mama. The doctors can't explain it, but she's better, significantly better. They're running tests, but her vitals are stronger than they've been in months." By the time Michael arrived at the hospital, dawn was breaking over the city, and he found his mother alert, lucid, and holding her wooden statue with surprising strength. The attending physician, Dr. Williams, pulled him aside with a bewildered expression. "Your mother's improvement is unprecedented," Dr. Williams admitted, studying the overnight reports. "Her cancer markers haven't changed, but her body's response has strengthened dramatically. We're calling it an unexplained stabilization, but between you and me, I've been practicing oncology for 20 years, and I've never documented anything quite like this." Michael's academic training kicked in immediately. Spontaneous remission, though rare, occurred in cancer patients. Temporary stabilization could result from the body's natural fluctuations. Medical anomalies happened, and desperate families often interpreted normal variations as divine intervention. But the night nurses had reported other details that were harder to dismiss with clinical reasoning. "The room felt different around midnight," whispered Maria Gonzalez, the nursing assistant who had been monitoring Elena. "Not cold or warm, just peaceful. Like someone had turned down the volume on everything, and I swear I smelled roses, even though there weren't any flowers in the room." Another nurse, Jennifer Walsh, had mentioned something even more unsettling. I was walking past around 1 a.m. and I could have sworn I heard soft singing coming from 314. Not Mrs. Santos, her voice was too weak. But when I checked, she was alone, just holding that little statue, and she was sleeping peacefully. Michael dismissed these accounts as imagination influenced by stress and long shifts. Night workers often experience sensory distortions, especially in emotionally charged environments like hospital wings, where families face loss. Yet as he sat beside his mother's bed that morning, watching her trace the familiar contours of the wooden figure with renewed energy, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a question he refused to acknowledge. What if there were forces at work that his philosophy textbooks had never adequately explained? 3 days later, Elena's unexpected stability had earned her a temporary discharge home, where she insisted on placing her wooden statue in its familiar spot on the kitchen windowsill. Michael had driven over to help arrange her medications and ensure she had everything needed for comfortable hospice care. "I still think you should stay in the hospital," he said, organizing pill bottles with methodical precision. "If something happens at home, we'll lose precious time getting you back to emergency care." Elena smiled from her favorite armchair, afternoon sun casting gentle shadows through the window. "Miguel, home is where I need to be. This is where I've talked to her every morning for 50 years. Michael's jaw tightened as he reached for the statue, intending to move it safely away from the edge. "Mamai, you can't base medical decisions on conversations with—" His elbow caught the wooden figure, sending it tumbling toward the tile floor. Michael lunged forward, but the statue struck the ground with a sharp crack, splitting along its base and separating the head from the body. Elena gasped, her hands flying to her chest. Rosa, who had been preparing tea, rushed over with tears forming. "Miguel, how could you? That statue has been through everything with our family." "I'm sorry," Michael stammered, kneeling to gather the broken pieces. "It was an accident. I can fix this. There are restoration specialists who work on religious artifacts." But as he held the damaged statue, his phone rang urgently. The caller ID showed his daughter Jennifer's number. "Dad, thank God you answered." Jennifer's voice was shaking. "I'm okay, but I was in a terrible accident. A drunk driver ran a red light at 5th and Main, the exact intersection you told me to avoid. If I hadn't gotten your text about taking the alternate route, I would have been right in the path of impact." Michael's blood ran cold. "What text, honey? I didn't send you any text today." If this story is pulling you in, subscribe now and tell me in the comments what you believe is really happening. Your insight might reveal something we haven't seen yet. "Yes, you did, Dad. About 20 minutes ago, you told me traffic was backed up at 5th and Main, and I should take Maple Street instead. I thought it was weird because you never text about traffic. But I followed your advice. The paramedics said the other car would have hit my driver's side door directly." Michael pulled out his phone with trembling hands. No sent messages, no record of any text to Jennifer. His message log showed only incoming texts from Rosa about Elena's medication schedule. Rosa was staring at him with wide eyes, and Elena had grown very quiet, her gaze fixed on the broken statue in Michael's hands. The afternoon light streaming through the window seemed different somehow, softer, more golden. "Dad, are you there?" Jennifer's voice seemed distant. "How did you know about the accident before it happened?" Michael looked from his phone to the shattered statue, to his mother's knowing expression, and for the first time in his academic career, he found himself completely without rational explanation. What force could send warnings through technology he'd never touched? And why did its protection seem so intimately connected to the wooden figure now lying broken in his trembling hands? The call from Carlos came at 2:17 a.m., exactly 1 week after the broken statue incident. Michael hadn't spoken to his younger brother in 3 years, not since their bitter argument about Elena's medical bills and Carlos's refusal to contribute while struggling with alcohol addiction. "Miguel, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. Carlos's voice was hoarse but clear. "But I had the strangest dream about Mama tonight. She was holding that wooden statue, and she told me it was time to come home. When I woke up, I felt forgiven for everything." Michael sat up in bed. "Carlos, it's 2 in the morning. Are you drinking?" "No, Miguel. I've been sober for 4 months. Tonight, something happened I can't explain. I was thinking about calling Mama, and my phone rang before I could pick it up. When I answered, there was no one there, but I heard her voice saying my name, just once." Back at the hospital, Elena had been readmitted that afternoon when her breathing became labored. The same room, 314, had been available, and Rosa had carefully placed the broken statue, now held together with medical tape, on the bedside table. But according to the night staff, Elena's condition had stabilized again in ways that defied medical explanation. Nurse Patricia Hernandez was making her rounds when she noticed something that made her stop outside Elena's room. The machines were registering normal readings. She would later tell Dr. Williams, but there was something else. There was singing, not from Mrs. Santos. She was sleeping peacefully, but a soft voice, almost like a lullaby, coming from inside the room. When Dr. Hernandez entered to check on Elena, she found the elderly woman resting comfortably, her color much improved from earlier that evening. The broken statue sat on the nightstand, its pieces carefully aligned despite the tape. The strangest thing, Dr. Hernandez confided to her colleague, was the temperature. It was November. The heating system was struggling, but that room felt warm, gentle, like sitting in sunlight on a spring morning. Other staff members began noticing changes too. Elena's room always smelled faintly of roses, even though fresh flowers weren't permitted in the cancer ward. The hallway outside 314 felt different, more peaceful, as if the usual tension and grief simply stopped at Elena's doorway. When Michael arrived the next morning, he found Carlos sitting beside their mother's bed for the first time in 3 years, holding Elena's hand while she dozed peacefully. The wooden statue, broken but somehow still radiating the same quiet presence, seemed to watch over the reunion. "She's going to be okay," Carlos whispered, his eyes bright with tears. "I don't know how I know that, but I do." But as Michael looked at his family, his mother inexplicably stable, his brother mysteriously transformed, and the broken statue that somehow still seemed whole, he realized that the question wasn't whether Elena would be okay. The question was whether he was prepared to accept what these impossible moments might mean about the nature of protection, prayer, and the mysterious forces that seemed to hover just beyond the edge of rational understanding. The incident with Jennifer's car occurred on a Tuesday evening, exactly as Elena was beginning her nightly rosary prayers in room 314. According to the timestamp on the security footage that would later puzzle investigators, Jennifer's brakes failed at 7:47 p.m. while she was driving down the steep hill on Riverside Drive, her car accelerating toward a busy intersection with no way to stop. Elena had taken the wooden statue into her hands at precisely 7:45 p.m., her fingers tracing the familiar contours where the medical tape held the broken pieces together. Rosa sat quietly in the corner chair, watching her mother begin the first decade of the Hail Marys, her voice barely audible in the dimly lit hospital room. "Hail Mary, full of grace," Elena whispered, her breath shallow but steady. "The Lord is with thee." At 7:47 p.m., exactly as Elena reached the words, "Pray for us sinners," Jennifer's car veered sharply to the right, away from the intersection and into an empty parking lot, where it rolled harmlessly to a stop against a concrete barrier. The steering had suddenly become responsive again, as if invisible hands had guided the wheel away from disaster. Jennifer called Michael immediately, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "Dad, the strangest thing just happened. My brakes went out completely on Riverside Hill, but somehow I managed to steer into the Safe Mart parking lot instead of plowing into traffic. The mechanic is here now, and he says my brake lines were completely severed. There's no way I should have been able to control the car at all." Michael was driving to the hospital when Jennifer's call came through his Bluetooth. He pulled over, his hands gripping the steering wheel as a cold realization washed over him. "What time did this happen, honey?" "Just now, around 7:45. "Dad, there's something else weird. Right before the steering kicked back in, I could swear I heard someone saying the Hail Mary prayer really faintly, like it was coming through the radio. But the radio was turned off." Michael glanced at his dashboard clock. 7:52 p.m. Elena would be in the middle of her evening rosary right now, just as she had been every night for as long as he could remember. When he arrived at the hospital, he found Elena exactly where he expected her. Rosary beads moving slowly through her fingers, the broken statue cradled gently in her lap. Rosa looked up with tear-filled eyes. "She's been praying for Jennifer specifically tonight," Rosa whispered. "She woke up from her nap around 7:30 and said she felt like our Jennifer needed extra protection. She's been praying the rosary for her safety ever since." Michael sank into the chair beside his mother's bed, watching her peaceful concentration as she continued her prayers. The timing was impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Elena couldn't have known about Jennifer's danger, couldn't have coordinated her prayers with the exact moment her granddaughter needed divine intervention. But there she sat, holding the broken statue that somehow still seemed to radiate the same protective presence it had possessed for 50 years. Her whispered prayers creating an invisible shield around the people she loved most. For the first time since his graduate studies began, Michael found himself wondering if faith might be less about believing in the impossible and more about recognizing the impossible when it chose to believe in you. What force connected a grandmother's prayers to a granddaughter's protection across miles of city streets? And why did every miraculous moment seem to flow through the cracked but unbroken heart of a simple wooden statue? The call came at 3:22 a.m. on Thursday in late November. Dr. Williams's voice was gentle but urgent. "Mr. Santos, you need to come immediately. Your mother has taken a significant turn for the worse." Michael arrived to find Elena unconscious, her breathing labored and irregular. The monitors showed numbers that even his untrained eye could recognize as critical. "We've made her as comfortable as possible," Dr. Williams explained softly. "Her body is shutting down. It could be hours or days, but I wanted you to have time to say goodbye." Rosa and Carlos were already there, their faces etched with grief. They sat beside Elena's bed, holding her hands, whispering memories into the space between beeping machines. "We called Father Martinez," Rosa said through her tears. "He's coming to give her last rites." The broken statue sat on the bedside table, its taped pieces somehow more poignant now, a damaged thing still trying to hold itself together. As hours passed, family members came and went, sharing stories, offering prayers. But as midnight approached, Michael found himself alone with his mother for the first time since this journey had begun. Elena's breathing was shallow, each breath a whispered struggle. The room felt different in the darkness, more intimate, as if the walls were leaning in to witness this final conversation. Michael reached for the wooden statue, his fingers tracing the same contours Elena's hands had smoothed over 50 years of devotion. The tape was wearing thin, but somehow the pieces still held together, just as Elena had held together through loss, through disappointment, through watching her beloved son reject everything that gave her life meaning. "Mama," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if she can hear me." He looked at the statue, its painted eyes seeming to watch him with infinite patience. "But I need to tell you something." The words came slowly, painfully, like water breaking through a dam. "I was wrong about everything, about faith, about prayer, about what matters. I spent so many years being proud of my intelligence, my skepticism, explaining away miracles." Elena's breathing seemed to deepen slightly, though her eyes remained closed. "But I can't explain away what's happened these past weeks. I can't rationalize Jennifer's protection or Carlos's transformation or your impossible recoveries. and I can't explain away 50 years of your love, your prayers, your absolute certainty that someone was watching over all of us." Michael's tears fell freely now. Decades of accumulated pride dissolving in the face of mystery he could no longer deny. Outside the window, dawn was touching the horizon, and somewhere in the distance, church bells were calling the faithful to morning mass. What would happen in the hours that followed, whether Elena would find strength for one more day, or whether this night would mark her final passage, Michael no longer tried to predict or control. He simply sat in the darkness, holding the hand of the woman who had taught him everything about love and nothing about doubt, while a broken statue watched over them both with the patient grace of mysteries that transcend human understanding. Elena Santos passed away peacefully at 6:47 a.m. on Friday morning, just as the first golden rays of sunlight streamed through the hospital window and illuminated the wooden statue on her bedside table. According to the nurses present, her final breath came exactly as the church bells across the street finished their morning call to prayer. Michael had never left her side during those final hours, and in the moments after Elena's passing, something remarkable happened that the medical staff would quietly discuss for months afterward. The broken statue, held together with medical tape for weeks, seemed to emit a soft, warm glow in the morning light. Not supernatural, the nurses insisted, but somehow more radiant than sunlight alone should have made possible. "Your mother was holding it when she passed," Dr. Hernandez told Michael gently. "Somehow, during the night, she'd taken it from the table into her hands. When we checked at dawn, she was cradling it like she'd done for 50 years. In the days that followed Elena's funeral, the protective incidents didn't stop. Carlos, now 6 months sober, narrowly avoided a construction accident when a voice, he swore it sounded like Elena, told him to step away from a scaffold that collapsed minutes later. Jennifer began carrying a small prayer card of Our Lady of Guadalupe after her car's engine mysteriously restarted during a blizzard, saving her from hours stranded in dangerous cold. Rosa reported that her chronic back pain, which had plagued her for years, simply disappeared the morning after Elena's funeral. And Michael, Dr. Michael Santos, professor of philosophy and lifelong skeptic, found himself visiting St. Mary's Church every Tuesday evening, not to pray exactly, but to sit in silence and contemplate questions that his academic training had never prepared him to answer. The wooden statue now sits on Michael's mantelpiece, no longer held together with tape. During Elena's wake, the pieces had somehow fused back together overnight, leaving only faint hairline marks where the breaks had been. Art restoration experts who examined it found no evidence of glue, welding, or any human repair technique whatsoever. "I still don't understand what happened to our family these past months," Michael admitted to Rosa recently as they sat together looking at the statue. "I can't publish papers about miraculous interventions or divine protection. My colleagues would think I'd lost my mind, but I also can't pretend these things didn't happen." The strangest part, Michael often thinks, isn't the unexplained recoveries or the impossible timing or even the mysterious phone calls that saved lives. The strangest part is how natural it all feels now, as if grace had always been flowing around his family and he'd simply spent 40 years refusing to notice its presence. If this story moved you, subscribe to Virgin Mary Mysteries so you never miss the next chapter in these extraordinary mysteries. And in the comments below, share the phrase, "Sacred Protection Always," so we can create a prayer chain for all families facing the impossible. Students in Michael's philosophy classes sometimes notice that Professor Santos teaches differently now, less certain about the boundaries between the rational and the mysterious, more willing to explore questions that have no clear answers, more open to possibilities that transcend academic understanding. But late at night, when Michael sits alone in his study grading papers, he often glances at the wooden statue and wonders, was Elena's faith vindicated by miracles, or do miracles simply reveal themselves to those who love deeply enough to keep watching for them? Some mysteries he's learning are more beautiful when they remain unsolved.